boards at the middle of this month, going into December. I didn't know anything about it, and if I hadn't been on the scrutiny board, I don't know how would I have found out about that process taking place, because there's all chance that residents come back to me saying, what's this all about? And if I don't know, it looks rather embarrassing.
I think we have had a few member discussions relating to the review of the local lettings policies. I think we had one around December time where we invited members to the discussion, and then the follow-on, as we were finalising the policy, we held a further session with members. I'm not sure whether maybe you weren't able to attend that session. But in terms of the communication with individual members, as we launched the tenant engagement, we have been emailing members to explain that we're about to go out to consultation, fully aware, as you say, the minute those letters drop on doorsteps, people come to you and ask what's going on. So we should have been, and apologies if it hasn't happened in your case, we should have been emailing you to explain that tenant engagement is about to happen. And then when we have concluded the tenant engagement, when we've done the data analysis, we are meeting with members to explain these are our findings and these are our recommendations based on the evidence that's available, and what is your view. And certainly we're about, for that phase 2, we've had one of the meetings, and for the remaining we are arranging those meetings to discuss the findings of the policy reviews.
I'm relieved to see my colleague from the same wards nodding her head as well. We haven't. Thank you.
Sorry, so you've mentioned that members are being involved in their own members' inclusion discussions, but I think members, as representatives of their community, would really want to be involved alongside members of their community when they're being discussed in situ. Councillor McCluskey, did you have anything else to add on that?
I think I covered it.
Okay, Councillor Haigh.
Thank you, and I've got two areas I'd like to talk about, which are, I think, related. If you look at the age criteria for local listing policy, where we have homes that are available for over 55s, and this was raised during early consultations, I know. Over 55s are people who are active and still in work in many cases. They're not living a retirement lifestyle necessarily, and they are moving into properties which are for people were originally designed to have a retirement lifestyle within them. And I think as people live actively longer, it was raised, and I think I want to raise it now, that we should reconsider what that age appropriate letting is. 55 seems young. You know, I'm over 55, but I don't feel I need to live in a retirement property yet. And, you know, that's fortunate for me as well, having reasonably good health. But there does seem to be a conflict in lifestyles. So you've got people who are working, who are not able to engage in the social activities that might take place during the day, because it devalues the experience for people who do want that kind of lifestyle. But also, you know, is that appropriate for someone who is younger? I understand it's a real balance, and people have very different needs as we age. But I do know, you know, from having researched for members of my family, that the private sector retirement communities that are available often have like almost a two-tier retirement communities, and they may be over 55 as well, maybe 60 plus, and then maybe 70 plus, with different levels of what is catered for in those. So the private sector's recognised. People are active longer, and then they want more support as they're older and have different offers. But also I feel that it would free up more of the older age properties for people who really need that support and that community. And we have other suitable accommodation for people who are younger. I hope that makes sense. But also there's a reference in the paper to right sizing, which I think is related. It's saying that as people get older, we would like them to move out of 3 and 4 bedroom family homes into, whether it's supported accommodation or accommodation for older people, or even just a flat or a smaller property that's more easy to maintain. But there's no real detail here on what that is and how that would work, whether there'd be incentives involved in that. And I think that could be a really positive policy in terms of making sure that people have suitable accommodation throughout their lives. That's it.
Thank you. So on the age criteria, I suppose retirement life is different to the local lettings policy arrangements. So for our retirement life schemes, there is the generic lettings policy, and the age criteria for retirement life sheltered is age 60. So that is a different age criteria. I appreciate that 55, as the closer you get to 55, the younger it seems, is that we do need to consider whether that's we need to review the age criteria. But I think what's also important is we need our family houses are our most precious resource, and so we've used age criteria as a way of encouraging people to move to more suitable accommodation in order to free up those family homes for families. So I think we're not necessarily saying that our blocks which are over 55 are retirement communities. I think they're aimed at that older tenant group or that ageing tenant group rather than necessarily. Many of them have become retirement communities, particularly in the east of the city where we have very little retirement life accommodation. I think there is much more of a focus on those being retirement communities. But I think we're trying to do something that's a little bit more flexible than the retirement life service offer, which is very specific around the service offer that's there and the allocations policy that is slightly higher at age 60.
I think I understand that, but also I think that at 55, many people will still have adult children living with them because those adult children can't move into suitable accommodation or can't afford to. So those family homes are still being used as family homes into an older age. I think that's been a real shift in how families work now, and the lack of availability of suitable accommodation for young single people. So I just think it's something that's worth looking at, and whether it's bringing it in line with the retirement life might be a good way forward.
Okay, well we've developed the policy at 55 currently. The citywide policy is being developed at 55. These policies will be in place for up to 3 years, and I suppose at that point possibly we could review and consider an older age range if that's deemed to be suitable. I think we've got such a mishmash of different policies. What's important is we introduce a degree of consistency, and then we can look to see what the benefit and the impacts of those policies are, and then from that we can refine them further. I think the main focus this time is to try and harmonise things as much as we possibly can, but certainly happy to look at it as we progress with the policy.
Thanks. Can I follow up Councillor Haig's questioning?
Okay.
And ask, have you included adult services as part of your consultee pool for looking at these local lettings policies which are associated with over 55s? Because there might be some conflict with their policies around adaptations to homes where people are encouraged to stay in situ as long as possible. So your policy of getting people to downsize is being counteracted by another part of the same council, potentially. But there must be some way of finding a policy route to ensure that that conflict isn't there and that you're both achieving what you need in terms of getting the best outcomes, one, for your properties and for them in terms of people of that particular age group. I'll move on now to Councillor Farley.
Thank you, Chair. As a representative for one of the areas that has already gone through this process, I do share some of the concerns expressed by some of my colleagues in terms of kind of the communications to members prior to this process. In Bermondsey and Richmond Hill, we received a very sort of generic anodyne email that didn't really sort of draw attention to itself. And, you know, if it was just me, fair enough, but my other colleagues also didn't pick this up, and obviously this is going to be this could have led to quite significant changes for the ward area. So the first thing that we really knew about it was when residents were getting in touch with us to say, are you getting rid of our policy? However, subsequent to that, and I would say really sort of credit to the Bermondsey Housing Office and the wider team, the member engagement when we did flag this was really good. And, you know, I feel we had a very good conversation, a deliberative conversation in which kind of we came to what felt like a well-balanced and informed formed response around this. So I suppose my comment would be, can we try and make sure that members are engaged, you know, even if it is like a big sort of, hey, this is happening, please pay attention, you know, email prior to it, going ahead. Because, again, you know, my experience has been good, but we could have just known about it a little bit earlier, which would have been helpful. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Dowson.
There's a few things I want to come back on you about as well. I think the thing as elected members... You all right, Councillor Anderson? Yeah. Oh dear. As councillors, we're all our views are all coloured by the work we do and the residents that contact us about different issues, and housing is one of the main things. Normally, we can't get a house, so everything you're doing is predicated on the fact we don't have enough council houses anyway. But there are two really valid points that have been brought up, and I think really it sounds like you've already made your mind up. So the consultation element comes a bit beyond me, because the points that Councillor Haigh made around the 55 policy, as long as I've been a councillor, we've had a 55 policy, but the retirement age has changed. So we're not talking about moving into an area where we've got supported living or so on. It's just that people are actually active for longer. And the main purposes of having a community that's over 55 has changed because people are living active lifestyles for longer. And I think that needs recognising. People move into a development that's over 55 because they expect it to be a little bit quieter, they expect it to be... That's no detriment to younger people, but they do live a different lifestyle, and they often feel uncomfortable living in an environment where they can't play their music as loud as they want, or they can't do this, because they'd be upsetting their neighbours. So I think looking at the over 55s policy, I've only got one high-rise block in my ward, and it is for over 55s, and the majority of my complaints are just as been said before, it's people who have younger relatives who live with them in that property, not the tenant themselves. But I think it also needs to be made clear that we're not affecting people who live there now. We're looking at a policy so that when we let going forward, eventually over the years it will become a lettings policy that is in line with the retirement age potentially. And as that changes, maybe we should think about changing it as well. But what you're saying now is that the mind's been made up and this is going to be there for the next 3 years. Whereas what we're saying to you, if we are truly being consulted, we'd like you to look at the reasons we have a 55 policy. And does that reflect the age and the experience of people going forward? So that's number one. Number two is about the right sizing policy. At point 9, you've actually said some blocks. Whereas I'm assuming we're not talking about flats per se, we're talking about all our stock and right sizing. It's really difficult in my ward, again, coloured by my own experience. We have lots of larger families who are looking for larger properties that we just don't have. We've got people who've been on the waiting list 6-7 years on a band A, waiting for these larger properties. So moving forward, building properties, we need to take this into account, that our communities are changing and the need for different properties is changing. But also, when we're looking at our lettings policy and this right sizing policy, the problem for me is when people move into a house, especially a council house, it isn't just a house, it's their home. And it's how you manage that. So going forward, we need the stock that people will want to move into and feel happy to move into and not being forced to move into. I hope you know what I'm saying. Sorry, Chair, that's it.
James Rogers.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to come in before Mandy comes back on a particular point, just to reassure members on the issue that you're raising around 55 and the retirement age. I think what Mandy was seeking to say was that as part of the work that's done today, we haven't done any detailed work on assessing or otherwise the appropriateness of that as part of the policy, and it's all linked to the broader citywide allocations policy that we've got. But we clearly recognise the issues that have been raised by members. And I do think that if we were to look at any changes in that regard, then it clearly needs to be fully evidenced in terms of why we would be changing it and what the impact of that would be. So what I would suggest is, if there's a particular interest of members of Scrutiny on this, which I think there is that we go away and we do some further work on that specific issue, and we can come back with a paper to the board at some time next year with a proper evidenced analysis of what we think the opportunities are and what we might do about that looking forward. We can then, having had that debate, take away whenever, if we do need to do a further review, when we might do that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Anderson. Did you want to wait and let Mandy Sawyer come in first?
I will try. Right. The data analysis that you're doing, have you done it for my area, for example, yet? Or is it to be done? If it has been done, can you send copies to us? If it's not been done, fine. That will come eventually. In terms of you may have sent me information. I just can't recollect getting it. So, have you got any FAQs that you could send through to us as to what's been happening in the earlier phases, the things that worked, things that didn't work, and how we as councillors can then improve upon it so that we go on so that then the one about new build, that's going to be coming forward in November. Well, this is November. So what are you bringing forward to us?
So FAQs, certainly, yes, we can develop some FAQs to share with members. I suppose if I can just come back, I'll come back on the new build in a minute, but if I could just respond to Councillor Dowson, your response. I mean, I would like to try and reassure you that we haven't decided, and the member consultation is an important part of that engagement. And certainly from the discussions we've had with the Bermontoffs members, that there has been very much a discussion around what will work and what won't work, and there's been a discussion around what those outcomes could be. So please don't feel, I think we've agreed these citywide policy approaches, and those were agreed back in the summer. And as James says, you know, we can review that. And I think with the data that's available to us in terms of the allocations, you know, we can see what's the age of people that are moving into the blocks and what are the issues that are being caused by those residents. So more than happy to look at that as a model. But I think what I was trying to say was that we're trying to harmonise, so at least we have something that it's a consistent and robust approach, because these policies haven't been reviewed for many years. Just to come back to Councillor Anderson on the new build, we are preparing to start consultation in November. So we're currently working up what that consultation will be, on what the proposals will be. But to be honest, I've not seen the details of that. And so we'll be working that up to go live in due course during November.
Can I just come back on that? Would it not be a good idea to maybe now we are where we are, to bring it to scrutiny and say, well, what do you think about this? Because at the moment, that's where a number of the affordable houses that we've got are going to be coming forward in terms of the amount of development that's taking place citywide. So that's going to be one of the major sources of how you want to define affordable housing. We can have a wonderful debate on that, but houses at less than market value, let's agree on that. Because I've got problems. I've had a lot of developments in my area, but residents haven't been able to access these housing because it's been open citywide, and people from the citywide, everybody likes a nice new shiny new house. Doesn't matter which part of the city. If you can get a nice shiny new house, people aspire to try and move into it, which then unbalances. Because what's happened to me now is people have come into my ward, and now they're turning around and saying, well, can you do something about the public transport system? Well, anybody who knows, as Jane will tell you, come into our area and you know the public transport system is bad from the very beginning. So they were quite happy to they've got the houses, but the infrastructure wasn't there. So in other words, these people didn't own cars, and now they're finding that they've got council properties or affordable houses that they've been given to, but they've got no way of moving around the area, which it's a law of unintended consequences. So that's what I mean. That's the sort of thing we need to look about. Where are we building those? What we're putting in place to make sure that the people who are moving in understand that there aren't shops nearby, that you're going to have to go some distance to do it, and also in my area, if you're buying your shopping, it is going to cost you more than in other parts of the city because there are fewer shops, so they can get away with charging you a bit more. And that has an effect on those people who are from the social housing side of things as to whether or not they can afford to live in areas. So you need to look at all of these impacts as to what we're doing. And the other thing on the data, when you've got housing demand, a lot of people might aspire to move into a larger house with a view to starting a family. But how do we deal with current demand? You know, if you were to ask people, you know, do you want to get married or do you want to form a household and then have children? A lot of people would say yes. But if you do that, you might allocate a house they might only then qualify just now for a 1-bedroom or a 2-bedroom house, where in fact, give it 3 or 4 years and they might be needing access to the 3 and 4-bedroom house, etc., etc. How are you going to deal with that on your data collection? Because that's where it really does get complicated, where people have got aspirations to start families or have elderly people to come to live with them for whatever reason.
If I may, Mandy, Councillor Anderson raises some very pertinent points, but I appreciate they aren't really within the remit of reviewing our local lettings policies, because what happens with our local lettings policies is we deal with people's circumstances as they are now, not as they might anticipate being or aspire to. So I appreciate that those are areas that the housing team in general might wish to consider when they're looking at their policies and allocation. But it might also be of interest for you that the IIIG Scrutiny Board is looking at their new policy on the delivery of affordable housing across the city, and I think that's where geographic need and environmental considerations can be taken into consideration when we're looking at where houses are put in. Mandy, did you have anything to add on that one?
I think, I suppose I've not come back on the right sizing point, which I know a couple of people have mentioned. I think we are very aware that we have a number of our homes that are under-occupied, and I think our main focus is actually on trying to encourage people to right-size down rather than up, because I think if you overcrowded, then obviously you get additional priority through the current lettings policy. So it is very much about how we can encourage residents to downsize, and that's the purpose of us wanting to introduce this as a citywide local lettings policy type. We are alongside that considering how we can encourage and how we can support residents with that downsizing, because very aware that some of our residents don't have the support of family and friends that can guide them through the process. So we're currently working up proposals around staff support and also some form of financial incentive that would help in terms of decorating and carpets, just to make that move easier. But certainly we have a proportion of our stock that is under-occupied, and in the current climate where there's huge demand for social housing, that is one of our ambitions, is to try and reduce the amount of under-occupation so that we do have that best use of housing stock. And we very much see the local lettings policies as an avenue for achieving that.
I'm aware that we are overrunning the time we did allocate to this paper, but I can always cut back in other ones later on. One of the things that was of interest to us in the business meeting was understanding how you measure local sufficiency around certain local lettings definitions. And in terms of that right-sizing policy that you were talking about earlier, people don't just want to move to a house which is of a different size. They also want to ensure that they are moving to a house of the right size, generally where they already live and where their social networks and their family obligations are. And I don't think perhaps choice-based lettings systems enable that kind of move to happen. So one of the things that might be of use to us later on when we're just discussing this area is the ability of direct lets to enable that supply to be delivered. Councillor Dowson, you wish to come back?
Yeah, and thank you for that, because the direct lettings system actually is an interesting one potentially to discuss to help the ambitions that we have across the city. But I've got 2 points. One is the use of the word incentives. If you can't afford to move, if you have the word incentives makes it sound like people are getting something, and so getting support, I think, probably would be a better phraseology, going through, because if you're on your own, sometimes the stress, I mean, it's one of the most stressful things you can do, moving, not having that support, and it's whether we've got the capacity to give that support or whether it's a third sector organisation in finding a builder, finding a decorator, finding a gardener, finding carpets and all this. So I think it's the level of support we give around that offer that we make for people to move. But I think language is quite important, because we're not, and the second one is something we haven't mentioned yet, and it's just to say I really appreciate the fact you've put in this sensitive let policy. I've not heard about this before, and I think it's a great thing. I think it's interesting because we give houses quite rightly because people need them. But sometimes that means you're not building a community, because you're putting a lot of people with a lot of the same issues in the same place at the same time, which isn't helping them, to be honest. So I think being sensitive, and I like the word sensitive, because it isn't about turfing people out, and it's about a sensitive management to make sure that you're building a stable community. So I appreciate that's in there. Just want to say that.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Dowson. Did you wish to respond to that? Councillor Harland.
No, I was just going to say before you wound up, and bearing in mind a later item coming about the transformation, how did we ensure that our tenants without digital access were consulted on this?
When we did the citywide consultation, we did the consultation online, and that was the only route, and we got quite low response from tenants. So when we moved to doing the individual local lettings policy reviews, we took a decision to write to people. So everybody got a letter explaining that the review was happening with details of their opportunity to feedback. In most cases, it was an online form that was available via a QR code on the letter that you could respond to the survey. But we did offer a telephone number that people could respond to by phone. But also we did some door knocking, and in blocks where we have found that there's been particular anxiety from residents, we've arranged drop-in sessions, so staff have gone and explained what the changes are to tenants.
Okay, thank you. So the recommendations before us are that we note the information contained within the report, and we consider the information within the report and identify any areas for investigation for further reporting. I think we've given quite a few areas for further finessing of how the policy is delivered, and we look forward to further engagement as local councillors when you come to our communities. So thank you for the time today, and I hope you found it valuable. Right, we'll now move on to our next item of business, which is item 9, which is the welfare review. Joining us today to discuss this item, we have Lee Hemsworth, who is also, of course, looked after by the Director, James, who's staying with us, and Councillor Harland. And we should be seeing Joe Rowlands and David Fryer to help us with some of the detail around our areas of questioning. So we'll just wait for them to settle down and move into the questions. Members, who would like to go first? Okay, sorry, we've asked for, by the looks I forgot from members, an introduction to the item before they'll go into questioning. So who'd like to introduce that?
I'll introduce that, please, if that's okay. Good morning, everybody. My name is David Fryer, and I'm the Head of Service for Welfare and Benefits. We've brought this paper today to provide hopefully a comprehensive update of the Council's welfare offer, and to give members an opportunity to ask any questions or identify any areas for further reporting. The paper is very detailed, so I will spare you the pain of referencing it word for word. However, I'd like to draw the board's attention to a couple of key themes, challenges and developments. The report begins by providing some economic context, which I think makes it clear that both nationally and locally there is still a strong demand for welfare support. With low-income households particularly susceptible to economic pressures, such as rising rents, food and fuel costs. The table in Appendix 1 within the report outlines the range of support available from the Council, which cover those areas impacted by cost of living pressures. So these include housing costs, council tax, food, energy, and the cost of essential household items, such as white goods or flooring. Wraparound advice and signposting help ensure residents who might not meet the criteria for a particular direct financial award will still receive some support from the Council. If I may, I'd just like to reference a couple of challenges and developments mentioned within the report, which I think deserve particular emphasis. The working age housing benefit caseload, which is not migrating to universal credit, are those tenants living in supported and emergency accommodation. Because of the subsidy rules referenced within the report, the council often don't receive full subsidy for the housing benefit that gets paid out to this particular cohort. Now this is referred to as subsidy loss, and it's a cost to the council. The combined subsidy loss last year was just over £11.5 million. This is a national issue, with other local authorities facing the same pressures. We are trying to do what we can within the Welfare and Benefits Service to restrict subsidy loss, and details of that are detailed within the report. And I just think it's worth mentioning that this year is projected to mark the first annual reduction in supported accommodation subsidy loss in a decade. So what we're implementing does appear to be working. Another successful development is seeing the use of council tax support claimant data to identify pensioners who are eligible for pension credits but not in receipt of that particular benefit. That work has been really successful. To date we've seen over 300 households make a successful claim for pension credit as a result of that work, and that's resulted in an average weekly award for those households of £75. And a total annual value of just over £1.2 million in awards. That's an extra £1.2 million into the Leeds economy as a result of that. The final section of the report highlights several anticipated challenges and opportunities which will impact welfare provision. I think it's fair to say the biggest challenge faced by the Welfare and Benefits Service will continue to be the impact of housing benefits subsidy loss. But other challenges include potential changes to the way free school meals are administered and possible further reductions in the Housing Benefit Administration grant. I'll now hand you over to Joe Rowlands, who will briefly outline some key points within the report which reference the financial inclusion team. Thank you.
Hi. So the financial inclusion team's role is to ensure that there's coordination and understanding of the welfare support that's available across the city. And I think, as highlighted in the report, a good example of that in terms of how our welfare services work across council services in the third sector is how we've administered Household Support Fund and managed the Household Support Fund programme within the city. That programme has been in place since 2021. It's Department for Work and Pensions funding, and that has been extended over short periods of time over that time period for either 6 months or 12 months, and we're now on the 7th iteration of that funding. But the way that we sort of administer that, or the way that we roll out that programme, is through direct support to low-income households where we can identify them, through our council services, so through housing, through children's services and through the welfare and benefits team, and through the extensive network of third sector providers that we have within the city, and we try to work to coordinate that as well as we possibly can to ensure that the support is available across a breadth of services within the city. The Household Support Fund has been replaced in April 2026, which you may well know, by a Crisis and Resilience Fund. This will be the first time that we've had funding beyond 12 months. It's going to be for 3 consecutive years. We don't have the detail yet in terms of the amount of funding or the remit of the funding available, but that will be coming early next year, and we'll ensure that the work to develop that is done in partnership. So that sort of concludes a summary of the report, and obviously welcome any comments on the detail and the content.
Thank you very much. Just as a matter of detail, you did mention the area around housing subsidy, and when this was discussed during a performance report earlier in the year, we did endeavour to write to the Minister to express our dissatisfaction that the Council is having to carry this cost. Unfortunately, we have yet to receive a substantive response other than an acknowledgement of receipt of that letter several weeks ago. So we'll let you know when it does finally arrive. So we will now go to questions from our members now that they've been better informed with the introduction, Who'd like to go first? Oh, looks like it's down to me. One of the things that we take serious responsibility for in the Scrutiny Board is that we look after equality, diversity and inclusion in how the council delivers its services in the city. And one of the areas which has been brought to my attention as a councillor, and I believe others as well, is in terms of people's transfer to universal credit. It can be a very anxious process, and it's also pretty technical and involves you turning up sometimes to job centres to offer testimony. This has been a significant issue for people who are adults with learning difficulties. It's been brought to my attention. And I just wondered, given the excellent service that you deliver, that you've reported here in the Welfare Review paper, could you give us some idea about what due regard you give to delivering that support in a different way to people with different equality characteristics?
I'll attempt to answer that question, thank you. So I think from my services point of view, we deal with people who migrate to universal credit from housing benefit. So we have the opportunity, as we're migrating somebody to universal credit, to pick up on any particular needs or vulnerabilities that that individual might have. If we identify something at that point, then we can offer or signpost that person to additional support, which I think the Citizens Advice are providing support with people migrating to universal credit. But we also have the option of referring people to our welfare rights unit as well, who can offer additional support if necessary. As well as housing benefit, we also administer council tax support, and it's the same principle there, I suppose, that we can pick up on any individual needs or any difficulties that that particular resident might have at the time, and signpost to appropriate support.
Councillor Farley.
Thank you, Chair. I think just following up on that point raised by Councillor Goldson, there was an incident recently that impacted on my auntie, and she lives with quite severe learning difficulties in residential care, and she received a letter, or rather her housing provider received a letter saying that her housing benefits were being stopped on the grounds that she'd had a change of circumstances. Now, given her particular needs, there's no change in circumstances that would ever remove the need for housing benefit. So, by receiving that letter, and that letter then being forwarded on to her carer, that caused a level of real anxiety, especially when you're confronted with the idea of well, where are we going to get the money from to ensure this specialist provision is there. Now, credit to yourself, David, because we obviously discussed this a couple of weeks ago, but I suppose my question is, how can we ensure that we're preventing situations like that from happening in future, and that anxiety that's then created, and really make sure that we are looking after people like my auntie who do have these severe disabilities?
Yeah, I think you've raised a really good point there, and I would like to add that we did resolve that issue quite quickly. But I think it was an unfortunate mistake. So it was that particular incident was, I think it was kind of human error, which we try to eradicate. We've got a quality assurance team in place to check assessments and so on. But in that particular case, unfortunately, that one slipped through the net. What I would say is we don't suspend housing benefit claims lightly. We review all housing benefit claims that are suspended to ensure that they're not left suspended for an indefinite amount of time. The housing benefit regulations are quite strict in terms of when a housing benefit claim can be suspended. And it is usually because we have doubts over somebody's entitlement, so that if someone has a change in circumstances and we don't know what their new, say, income or whatever it might be is, we often suspend a claim because there's a fear that we might end up overpaying that individual too much housing benefit, and then we put them under pressure because then we have to ask for that overpayment to be repaid. So we try to avoid that scenario. But yeah, I totally understand your point. We deal with a very vulnerable cohort of people, and we do our very best to make sure that, you know, we'll only suspend or cancel a housing benefit claim when it is absolutely necessary. Unfortunately, in this particular case, that one slipped through the net.
Thank you. Councillor Haigh.
Thank you. And first, I'd like to say, recognise, I think, from the board, the excellent work that was done around people not in receipt of pension credit who were entitled to it. I think that has highlighted you know, the good work of this team and the efforts that were made to make sure that people did get all the benefits they are entitled to, because of course pension credit is a passport to other benefits as well. And I think that was an excellent piece of work, and I see it continues. And you know, putting an average of £75 into people's pockets every week makes a real difference to people's lives. So thank you for that. I'd just like to, this is an issue that we've covered in the past, and it relates to when people move from housing benefit transfer to universal credit, and there was a mismatch between payments and rent due, and we were sending letters to people for being in arrears when they were technically in arrears, but of course because it's the way the dates mismatch, it was not their fault or intention, and that was causing a lot of stress with residents. Have we been able to resolve that issue?
I think that might be a question for Housing Leeds colleagues, because I think the letter comes from Housing Leeds. However, what I can say is that when we migrate somebody off housing benefit because they've claimed universal credit, we award a 2-week run-on of housing benefits. So beyond their termination date, they will get an extra 2 weeks, which I think is intended to cover them for that period before the universal credit rent payments get set up. I can't say, if I'm honest, positively whether Housing Leeds have addressed the issue over the letters that were going out about arrears. So I apologise for that.
And just to come, you're probably right, it is a question for Housing Leeds about this, but I was hoping it was something that could confirm had been dealt with. And of course, and the other issue I personally have is that people on benefits are encouraged to overpay on rent, so they've got a buffer, and I do feel that that's not appropriate and something that perhaps we could take away and look at, you know, people being asked to overpay rent out of benefits when they're not being given the benefits to overpay rent.
Thank you. Councillor Renshaw.
Thank you, Chair. You mentioned people's vulnerability. How do you measure the vulnerability of people, and how do you keep updated with it and on top so that somebody can become vulnerable within 24 hours or even less? I just wondered how you kept on top of that to make sure that all vulnerable people were being accommodated or facilitated.
We do our best. Like you say, I mean, someone could become vulnerable within 24 hours, and I think it'd be unrealistic to expect us to know that. We do rely on people informing us about changes in their circumstances. We have a vulnerable indicator on our benefit system which will tell an assessor immediately whether somebody has a vulnerability. But we do rely on being informed, and that may not necessarily be by the individual themselves. We receive information from other organisations such as the Department for Work and Pensions, and we work closely with other partners in the third sector and people like the Counter Tax Department who will pass on any details of any vulnerabilities, and Housing Leeds too. We also we can also add a vulnerable indicator if, for example, we see that somebody's in receipt of particular benefits, so what used to be DLA, which is now PIP, or attendance allowance and that kind of thing. And one example that I can give you is of how we kind of manage the whole issue of vulnerability is we've recently been charged by the DWP with reviewing the whole pensioner caseload, housing benefit pensioner caseload that is. And we kind of discussed the difficulties that very elderly pensioners might have in providing us the information that they might need to provide. So what we did is we kind of extended the time period that pensioners, or that cohort of pensioners had to provide us with the information that we needed. And I mean, that was a particularly easy one because we could just filter the caseload by date of birth. But I suppose I just wanted to reassure you that we do look at people's vulnerabilities and try and preempt problems that people might have in providing us with information we need.
Thank you. Are you working in a collaborative manner then with all of the departments in which, and that, if so, how well is that working, or is it being improved for better results?
I think we always strive to achieve improvements, but I think I can quite confidently say we work quite well with partner organisations. We've worked very closely with people like Counter Tax, Welfare Rights, the Financial Inclusion team, and the Department for Work and Pensions as well. So I think we share a lot of information between our services, which help us to identify vulnerable households and pick up on issues as they arise. That's not to say that there isn't room for improvement. There always is, but I think we're doing a fairly good job of that.
James Rogers.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to go back to Councillor Haig's comment about the letters. So whilst we've not got Housing Leeds colleagues with us in the room, I do have Jez who's watching the webcast, so he's messaged me just to provide some reassurance. I'll read out what he said. So but we've addressed the issues raised in terms of letters and suspend arrears action, but we do need tenants to speak to us to ensure these suspensions are placed on their accounts, and staff have been trained to ensure this takes place.
Thanks for the clarification. This leads into another area of questioning, if you don't mind, that Councillor Renshaw raised and you alluded to in terms of working alongside council tax colleagues. On page 55, you point to the fact that council tax collection rates in the city have reduced, and it says that this may be due to people's inability to pay, which implies that you don't know. But I would have thought if people are in arrears and we're sending them letters of instruction, that within that there is the offer of support. I also note that earlier in the same paragraph you talk about budget restraints, meaning that you're able to offer less support. So do we, going forward, if there's more people that need the support for council tax, do we have a limit as to how many we can help, or do the increasing number of people that we do help just get less help?
Yeah, I think the issue with council tax support is that the caseload has remained fairly stagnant over a long period of time now. So I don't think the issue is that more people need support. I think the issue is that the amount of council tax support that we can offer now has reduced because of the budgetary restraints. So back in, I think it was 2011, the funding arrangements changed, and local councils had to come up with local schemes that were funded locally. And as a result of that, our council tax support offer has become less generous. So usually now people are expected to pay 25% towards their council tax bill, which back in 2011 they didn't need to do. There were people who were getting 100% council tax. So I think that the point I was perhaps trying to make there is that possibly council tax arrears are rising because people are finding it more difficult to pay their council tax as a result of those changes.
Okay, Councillor McCluskey.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask about the people in crisis and crisis housing, and that's the situation's improved with the use access to a digital form. And I'm just wanting to know what happens to people who are digitally excluded. Is there any improvement in their service?
Yeah, so that referenced the local welfare support scheme, which is for people who are in a crisis, and we introduced the digital form to kind of to increase accessibility, but that's not at the cost of other methods of the expense of other methods. So we still have the ability, people have the ability to phone in and apply by telephone as they did prior to the introduction of the form. But we also have the Welfare Rights Unit as well, which we can refer people to if they're struggling with applying for that particular support or any other support that people might need in the city.
Thank you. Councillor Dowson, did you have a question?
Yeah, mine's on a completely different tack. It's around 80 to 82. It's the free school meals. It's really important. Those of us who are school governors know how important it is that that children get a good meal. Children who are hungry just don't learn. So that is fantastic news. But it's not till September 26, so it does give us a window to make sure that we have the right uptake of children. But also, I'm just wondering what your plans are to make sure that everybody who can access it does, and also what work you're doing with schools and catering suppliers, because there will be an increased number of children accessing those, and sometimes the halls aren't big enough and the kitchens and so on. So I'm just wondering what work's going to go on around that.
So we don't work directly with catering suppliers or schools. I think that would be another department within the council. However, so my service is responsible for making sure that free school meals are administered in the right way, and part of that responsibility is to ensure that we maximise take-up of free school meals within the city. So what we do is we use all the data at our disposal to data match, and where we find that somebody who is potentially entitled to free school meals isn't receiving them, we will contact the school and we will let them know. We also make that data available to schools online, so they can check themselves to see if children who are eligible are receiving a free school meal. We have actually been we've been praised in the past in Leeds in terms of how our free school meal take-up policy, but I suppose that's just one part of one element, I suppose, of the issue, because then the other side of the issue is the child actually having a free school meal when they're entitled to one. I mean, I know from personal experience that a child who's entitled to free school meals may not necessarily want one. They might prefer sandwiches. So that's something that colleagues in other departments in the council are working with schools on. Children's Services, Joe's kindly informed me.
Okay, thank you. Given that we're all very encouraged with what you've been able to achieve as a team in terms of helping the people of Leeds to keep their head above water in many cases financially, there was some concern around page 61, paragraph 59. And this is more of a question really for James Rogers and Councillor Harland. It says that the service has not recruited for several years, resulting in a significant reduction in full-time equivalent staff from 100 down to 64. Now, I would have thought that that's not a reflection of a reduction in demand on your services. So where do we feel the risk is in having less staff delivering more, and in terms of their well-being as employees, obviously, because stressed staff tend to go off on sick, don't they? if they're overloaded with work. How do we ensure that actually we're recruiting to the right level? And if we were successful in getting our money back on the housing benefit subsidy, would recruiting more staff be your first priority?
If I can come in on that, if that's fine, then Dave, you can jump in if I say this wrong. I think part, I mean, there's obviously a need to look at the team over time in terms of efficiencies and how we do things, and certainly the restructures looked at sort of how we do that. But I do actually think the reduction is in line with the move to universal credit because workload has changed over time. So it is a conscious decision to get into a position where we manage the numbers in line with the decline in the grants and things that we get. And I would imagine that over the next few years, given the acceleration of UC, we'll see a further decline in those numbers because the demands on the service are less because of the move to universal credit, because that's now administered by DWP rather than the benefits service. So there'll always be a core element of the team there to do the work that needs to be done in terms of housing benefit for those in supported accommodation and pensioners as well. But I think that will ultimately migrate across to UC and things like free school meals and council tax support. But we have tried to manage so that we're not in a position where we've got a surplus of staff and not the work to do. We've tried to manage that down. I don't know if Dave, you want to add anything, but I think that's the view.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much addressed the question, but I think it's also worth adding that over the last few years we've introduced quite a lot of automation, which again is introduced efficiencies, which means that rather than having somebody sat there keying away, we've been able to get the computer to do it for us. So I think that's contributed towards the kind of decrease in the need for as many staff.
Okay, that's very interesting. But given the initial discussion that we had around people that might need extra help from real people, I'm not sure, especially if they've got learning difficulties, they're not going to be helped by more automation of processes, are they? So anyway, I'm glad that you're taking that into consideration. Councillor Hannan.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm very, very impressed with your winter court appeal. There seems to be a lot of progress made on that. I've got a few comments, but also a question. Having been involved in winter court appeal, I've seen some of the donations that are being made are not sort of winter equivalent. There's sometimes summer stuff. I think that needs to be addressed if possible. And the figures that you've shared is amazing. Well done to everybody for doing that. My two questions are, I understand it's going to carry on this year. How much is going to be allocated? I think last year was 230,000. But the other main question was, we've got some really good big companies that make coats and outdoor coats and all that kind of stuff. Is there scope to ask them if they could make donations? Because they would most likely donate coats that are fit for winter, and it would sort of help people, stay warm. Thank you.
Hi, yeah, just to come on that. So just in terms of any items that are donated that aren't winter items, there are other organisations within the city, so Pudsey, Pudsey Community Project, I don't know if you're aware of that, and other types of organisations that do distribute clothes, so they aren't thrown away, they're like distributed if they're in good quality to other organisations that are able to use them. Wear and Share Leeds, which used to be Zero Waste Leeds, so they've changed name now, it facilitate the scheme, and they do work with corporate partners. I think it's an area that they want to try and expand and increase, but they've only got so much capacity. So I think it's a little bit of, yes, there is a good opportunity to do that, and they will do that. I think it's also worth mentioning that one of the ethoses of this scheme is about the whole recycling and reuse of coats. So, and that's sort of integral to the the project in itself, and that's about those winter coats being available across the city in as many different areas as we possibly can, and trying to encourage that message alongside obviously the need of people for those items as well.
The other question was, how much are you allocating?
So for both the winter coat appeal and the uniform exchange, that project receives £60,000 each year for that project.
Finally, we can't do it without the third sector. I know you've mentioned it very heavily, and Mary, you know my feelings about the third sector, and let's hope we can continue working with them, because they are a lifeline for a lot of people. I really appreciate this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Harrington.
Yeah, thank you. Just one thing, are there any plans to expand the distribution of the coats to some of the more outer areas? Because I know that certainly Wetherby and Harewood seem to be net collectors of coats, and we have a lot of contributions for that. But we also do have areas of deprivation within our communities who would actually benefit from them. And when we had the Breeze event last year, the uniform exchange people came, and it was extremely well taken up by people who just can't get to the other areas to go and collect them. So I'm just wondering if there are any plans to do some sort of distribution drop-in places in the outer areas that people could actually access. Thank you.
I mean, I think it's a difficult one, isn't it? Because it is tied up in funding, and it is also related to the number of volunteers that they can get in to help to do that. So I think there is the will and the desire to do that. I just think at the moment there is a capacity level in terms of what is available, what is achievable within that project.
I'd just suggest that there's been a really new initiative that's being launched in Wetherby Ward at the moment, which is there's a community hub that's actually not a council-run one. It's third sector people that are running that, and I'm sure that they would be delighted to actually assist in that, and that may be a way of expanding it out into the outer areas if we spoke to third sector organisations. Councillor Hannon sort of alluded to the fact third sector organisations are a mainstay, and there are many groups in the outer areas who I'm sure would actually be really pleased to get involved and help with that.
Yeah, thanks for that. I mean, just to say that the Wear and Share Leeds do work with all the community anchor organisations across the city, and they are linked in through the Welcome Spaces work as well. But yeah, I'll take that point and we'll go back and discuss it.
Okay, thanks very much. That draws the discussion to a Councillor Harland.
I think it would be remiss of me as my last scrutiny attendance as Exec Board Member for Communities, Community Safety, got it right, James, and Customer Service. Just to extend, it's nice to hear you acknowledge the great work that the teams have been doing. But I'd just like to say thank you to Lee, Joe and Dave for all the support that they've given me over the years, and long may it continue with Councillor Khan. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, I've got another late request from Councillor McCluskey.
I did say earlier. No, it was. First of all, I'd like to also commend the winter coat and the uniform exchange, because it saves families an absolute fortune. But I just wanted to come back onto the rollout of a universal credit, and the plan is to have it completed by December 25. Are we still on that date?
Yes, that's still the plan. The DDB, I mean, it's down to the DDBP at the end of the day, but the indications are, certainly from looking at the housing benefit caseload, that we should have migrated our caseload over by or around December 25. I expect there will be a few stragglers that will go on, but we should be almost there.
Great, fingers crossed. So our recommendations are to note the report and to obviously offer our further comments for you to digest and work on. But yes, thanks very much for the work that you do, and we look forward to seeing you next time at the Scrutiny Board. Thank you. And we'll now move on to item 10, which is customer strategy. Lee is going to remain with us to talk through a presentation which is basically going to update us on progress after the December 2024 Executive Board decision to transform our customer services to make them more relevant times. And hopefully we will be given some information in this presentation which will offer food for thought and discussion. Joining Lee today is David Halligan and Dylan Owen from the Digital Transformation team. Who would like to introduce the presentation? Lee.
Thank you, Chair. I'll do the go through the slides. There's a couple of questions at the end to hopefully stimulate some debate, but obviously I'll be happy to take the questions at the end as well, based on the programme. So yeah, so this is just to provide an update, just to give you a bit of context. We've took the new customer strategy to Exec Board in December last year, and we took a business case to Exec Board in June this year. And there was an ask of Executive Board was that this Scrutiny Board had oversight of this programme going forward. So this is the first time I come to give you an overview of that work. And one of the questions is, you know, your thoughts on how you are involved moving forward above and beyond us bringing progress updates and things like that. So there are a few slides which I'll go through. So that's what we aim to cover today. So I will give an overview of the programme and open it up for some group discussion feedback, and I'll cover the next steps as well in terms of where we are with this. So just in terms of brief strategic overview, so we got approval to a 3.5-year programme to look at how we as a council deliver services, really putting customers at the heart of everything that we do. The end of the programme, it has got efficiency savings attached to it. So the aim would be at the end of the programme that there are annual net savings of £4.5 million, and that's achieved through having a much more digital focus on those transactional high volume services that we get. But also as a result of looking at digitising, we want to reduce duplication and be in a position where we can deliver more at sort of first point of contact rather than having to hand off to other services and things like that. So a much more holistic approach. Obviously, it mentions there the sort of key strategies that this complements this work. And principally, although it isn't about shutting channels down like face-to-face and telephone, they will still exist. This is about, for those services where we can implement a more digital way of working, that we will do. And we know that is something that citizens are keen on. A number of them want to engage with us digitally, and we should make that easier for us. And obviously the aim there is to improve the customer experience as well. So we know that we have, and I'll come on to some of the challenges, things like broken processes and things like that now. Some of this is aimed at trying to alleviate and address those issues. We did some customer engagement, and we'll make sure these slides are circulated. Sorry, I think, Becky, you're going to do that, haven't you? Because some of the figures are difficult to read on here. We did a lot of engagement around the customer strategy. That included online services, but also within the council, we had a lot of people involved in the development of the work about 12 months ago around the strategy. We also did face-to-face in-person sessions with the city's equality hubs, and we did sessions at 4 of the bigger community hubs as well to try and make sure that we did that. And here there's some of the survey responses from that. So we got quite a high level, 850 responses to that. And And it's interesting, going back to what I said before, from that survey, we found that 84% were checked online before they got in contact with us. So that's the point about, we know a lot of people want to engage with us digitally. And oh, sorry. I think Becky's going to do it.
Yes, Becky's going to do it. For those of us with electronic instruments in front of us.
So I'll carry on, and then obviously we'll want to come back to those specifics once you've got that. So yeah, 84% want to do already online before they contact us. 95% of those respondents obviously using digital services in their lives, so that we know therefore that there is a big group of people who contact us who are used to using digital services, so should be able to do that. So also on that, 16% said they wanted to prefer to speak to a real person. So that's, we're never, like I said before, we're never going to shut channels down. We always know that people will want to contact us by other channels, and we will look to do that. So this is about making sure that where those people want to engage with us, they are able to do so. So in terms of the programme aims, there's 3 principal aims. So they're to deliver customer-centric services designed around life events and needs, so that we know this through our interaction in face-to-face. People will come in and talk to us because they need help with a certain thing, be it a council tax, an arrangement to pay their council tax in a different way. But we also know then that that's, as a result of that, there are other issues and things that they want addressing. So this part of this is around moving around life events and joining information together so that we can help people in a more holistic way. As I've already mentioned, a big part of this is about embracing digital and data to help people self-serve and to automate processes in the sort of organisation to reduce manual input. And I think the third area is about embedding a customer-first leadership and culture across the organisation. So that's the argument. Without that sort of leadership and culture, we're probably not going to get the traction on this that we need. In terms of some of the specifics that this programme will deliver, so the aim is a more unified customer front door. So based on data that we've had, that we know, it's about, we know that about 50% of our contact comes directly into services, so it bypasses our existing customer services, be that the contact centre or face-to-face. So we know there's a lot of contact out there that goes straight into services. So part of this programme is about building that customer front door so people have the same experience no matter how they contact us. End-to-end digital resolution, so that's enabling people to transact with us from start to finish in a digital way. A key part of this is around single view of the customer. So that will facilitate, we know, so for example, if I'm known to the council in 6 different services, I'm effectively 6 different people. Whereas if we have a single view and we work to bring the data together, they'll know that Lee Hemsworth is involved in 6 services and this is what it says. So that single view is really important in terms of us being able to deliver a more holistic service. There's key additional benefits in that in terms of how we then as an organisation can work. If we've got a more joined up view of the customer, can we join up better to deliver those services to customers? So that's a big output from this. And then obviously financial sustainability in terms of savings and things like that. We have, as part of the strategy in the way we will deliver the transformation, a set of design principles. These are the design principles. They're not rocket science in that sense. Hopefully you look at this and even in your own life and how you engage with organisations that you engage with. Hopefully these are familiar and you would expect this you know, in terms of how you would want to be treated by other organisations. And effectively, these provide the sort of guardrails for the way we develop. So when we transform services, we will have these principles in mind, and they'll have to effectively meet these principles in terms of how we design those services. So they're really important in that sense. Just a little bit in terms of the business case, just going back to the savings. So this gives a little bit of information about how we would expect to make savings. So there's over the lifetime of the programme, we're expecting just over 11 million of cumulative benefits. So that's delivered by three things: reducing demand. So that's repeat contact, removing repeat contact. We know people repeatedly contact us because they haven't had a resolution at that first point of contact, or they haven't been able to get through, etc. Big areas around channel shift. So that is moving contact to digital, be that people doing stuff online or digital voice as well, is a way of making savings. And then the third area is automating. So that's where we in the organisation automate processes, so we don't have manual intervention. So those three areas are the way we will make that saving. That materialises then into 6.2 annualised efficiency benefits by the end of the programme. But because there's a need to maintain the work we do when we are setting up infrastructure and teams that will continually be able to develop the digital solutions, there's a cost to that. So the annual net saving from the programme end is estimated to be 4.5 million, which is what we would be looking to do. So I mentioned earlier about some of the challenges. This just gives the principal ones there. So I mentioned that services are disconnected, not joined up. So this is big drive for this programme in terms of bringing those services together so that we can deliver at first point of contact, we can reduce duplication, reduce repeat contact, etc. In the organisation, we know there are different levels of skills, and we know that that is true outside and in community as well in terms of financial inclusion. So there'll be a focus both in terms of digital skills in the organisation and improving those, but also a focus on digital inclusion and working with communities and people to access these services in a digital way. Resistance to change, we know that's a key challenge, and that's true in the organisation and from communities as well. And part of the aim, big thing for us in this is we've often designed services from the inside out. So we've designed services to benefit services. So one of the aims we're trying to achieve here is design services from the outside in. So we'll do research with customers about how they would get to that and try and redesign the services so they're much more customer centered. Another key challenge we've got is around old systems and isolated data. We've got lots of legacy systems, lots of computer systems that have information on. We need to try and get that out somehow and join it together. That's a big key. And obviously the financial issues that we have, we've got staffing constraints in terms of teams and resources. So part of the programme is working with a partner who will help us over the programme to mitigate the impact of those sort of constraints. And just going on for benefits, hopefully these are self-explanatory. In terms of benefits, we hope that people get faster help. So most queries, 60 to 80%, solved at first time and customer contact. We know that a significant chunk of contact is around transactional activity. So we should be able to make that more streamlined than it is at the moment. Obviously benefits around this, aiming to do less waiting, so shorter call times, quicker responses. There's more control for residents in that they can use digital services outside of office hours when it suits them, which is obviously better. Hopefully a better experience, fewer complaints and quicker resolutions will give people a better experience. I think the next one's key around personalised support. If we can develop that single view, it means that we can start to deliver a different service, and residents can actually personalise what they want to engage with the council on. So that whole thing about personalised support, I think, is really important in terms of how we develop this. And just to make the point, extra support for complex needs. So sort of work on the 80-20 principle. If 80% can be done transactionally, it releases capacity in our hubs for them to work with much more, the more vulnerable families and individuals in the city, and provide that much more holistic support, which is where that has always been the aim of the hubs, to get to that. We just need to get rid of some of that transactional activity that they're working on. In terms of benefits of staff, there's more time for meaningful work. We know that's an issue for staff in the sort of routine, the dealing with queries. They want to help people, certainly customer services. They want to help people, and sometimes they struggle because of systems or because of the way they do it. So this will hopefully mean that the time they spend is spent more on meaningful work, which would increase their satisfaction, and we know that. Hopefully they'll have clearer roles, better tools, better training, less repetitive work, so the automation reduces those manual tasks, so again they can spend time on what they want to work with, and ultimately improve job satisfaction would be the aim from this. In terms of the council as a whole, cost savings I've mentioned. Obviously this is the start of a programme around sustainable change, so we would build a continuous improvement to continue that change. It isn't a one and done thing. As you know, digital evolves over time, so we have to stay and evolve over time as well. Hopefully it'll lead to smarter decisions. We've got real-time monitoring. If we join up data, we're better able to make those decisions. Hopefully better outcomes, earlier intervention, improved processes lead to better results. Sorry, yeah, only a few more. And obviously the aim is to do more with the same services. That just covers what we're doing now, which is effectively mobilising. We are in the process of just about to go out to procurement for a strategic partner, which we hope to have in place by the end of January, in terms of what we're doing. And they are just some questions that we've set, but obviously happy to take more. Any questions that the board has got? Apologies for running over a bit.
Thanks. Councillor Haigh.
Thank you. And I must say, this piece of work is really much needed and very welcome. There are some things that you mentioned. Still can't read the slides even on the screen, but I think what you seem to be talking about is perhaps something that might end up being an app of something of that description, so that people can easily interact with council services rather than having to, because it's legacy systems, it's a very patchy approach. You talked about us looking at customers, and I really dislike the use of the word customer in this context, because we're not customers in any meaningful sense of the word. We are residents interacting with our council, of which is part of our city. But that's just me. A holistic view of the customer. I think the customer should have a holistic view of the council. And if it doesn't, that will if people don't have that, it does generate more work. So, most of us interacting with other services now can see that with our bank, we can see all our bank accounts and what's going on, what's coming in and what's going out and what's due. And so I think it's really vitally important that we develop services that work in that way, that reporting things like fly tipping or misspins or whatever is really a very straightforward and simple approach, because there's a limit of people's patience with applications when they will then start to pick up the phone because it's easier just to speak to a human being. And obviously that must be in place for some things, but it is not, it's not where we want to be in terms of being efficient for residents and services as well. I'm quite interested in how this is going to be rolled out through testing with users and also members, because we're going to be highly engaged in using this product, whatever we end up with, and also have the needs of members that we are often reporting things on behalf of the people. Will that be possible through this system, or will we still be using our clunky emails that some services reply to?
Sorry, another turn off. Apologies. Just in terms of the, we have a holistic view of the customer or resident. They have a view of the council. So I think part of this would look at that sort of citizen account. So you could have an account, you would open that and you would see everything that you'd interacted with the council on in one place. So that would be part of the work here. In terms of the member engagement, the aim of this is to do it on a sort of service basis in terms of that change. So as part of that and as part of the mobilisation work and the design work, we will be talking to residents and engaging them in the sort of user research to understand how they want it. And we're committed to involving members in that process as well, and as well as services, obviously. So that would give that's the aim with that. And I think we would look at user testing. We do that now in terms of website design and all of that. So we would absolutely be looking at that as part of this. We have made reference to how we, the aim of this is ultimately to link with the sort of member case work system and how that works, and to improve your experience as well, because obviously we know you get customer issues channeled through you, and it would be good for you to be able to look up and see where things are when you've done that. So ultimately that would be part of the work that we would be looking to do. So the members casework is a dependency in this project that we'd be looking to interact with. I think I'm right. I don't know if any other colleagues have got anything to add on that.
That's right for me.
And just when people have an issue, a complaint, or something they need dealing with, will we be able to close the loop in that when that has been actioned, people can see that it's been actioned and accepted that is the end of it? Because obviously that does often generate repeat interactions just to find out what the status of something is when it's been dealt with, but people haven't had that feedback.
Yeah, I mean, we absolutely 100% that sort of feedback, and that's part of the problem now, as you've articulated. We do have online processes now, but a lot of the feedback is computer generated, and in lots of ways it doesn't make sense or something like that. So yeah, the feedback, closing that loop is absolutely central to this, because well, we need to inform people that what they've asked for, it's been done, but also, as you say, it generates repeat contact.
Great, thanks. Councillor Dowson.
Firstly, I've got to tell you, I love digital. I worked for one of the major mobile phone companies for 15 years, so I'm into digital. You wouldn't have believed that if you'd have sat next to me before we started and Councillor Haig was trying to show me how to do something on here. And what I'm saying is technology changes, and one of the frightening things for people is how technology changes quickly. You learn something and next week there's something new, and the level of support we give people around the changes, which will be great changes, listening to you, is fantastic. But it's got to be accessible, it's got to be easy to use, and it's got to be in plain English, no acronyms and so on. It's got to be the kind of thing I can use and people my age can use who went to school before computers. So I think the access is really important. I did get to read, you sent them over, they're still as small as ever, but the statistics are quite confusing. I mean, firstly, it's the responses. I think, what are we, 7.5 million population now? Is that a bit high? We've got a lot of people, but you only had 851 responses, which is, I think, quite a low percentage of the people who would be using the system. So how we can get the responses to a higher number and from a big cross section, because of these 851, who are those 851? Is it older people, younger people, people who don't work, and so on? It would be quite nice to bottom out who those people are. But the statistics are quite confused now. I was looking at it, says that 28% prefer to use our digital services, which means 72% don't prefer to use our digital services. And then it goes on to say 52% want to use digital, but only 28% prefer to use digital. So do you know what I mean? You've got an awful lot of people who are saying, different things. And I think reading into that would be quite an interesting thing to do. So the redesign is really important to make it as accessible as it should be. And I like the way you're going to make improvements as we go along. So it's not a done deal. If we find there's an issue, we can move on with that. But the other thing, and Mary will say, Councillor Harlan will say, she would say this, wouldn't she? You're talking about hubs. I'm talking about libraries. Our library service is a statutory service, and a lot of places that don't have hubs. For me to get to a hub, it's 6 miles and 2 buses. For me to get to a library is 1 bus and 3 miles, and that's a big difference. So can we make sure that we actually look at how we train up staff in our libraries as well as our hubs to make sure people have a friendly face they can go and talk to, who will be accepting that they'll need to actually go through the systems with them. I think that's really important. But all in all, I think everything you've put in place, Lee, is fantastic. Thank you.
Very good. We'll go on to Councillor Farley.
Thank you, Chair. I think this is obviously really important work, but there's sort of 2 questions that strike me. Firstly, I'm somewhat surprised that this sort of like single point service integration hasn't really happened up until this point. You know, in the year 2025. But just thinking ahead, the things that instantly occur to me are: can we be more ambitious in terms of the scope of any platform that we're looking at? You know, thinking about, as Councillor Haigh suggested, like an app that really covers all things Leeds City Council. If you live in Leeds, this is, having some like ultimate source of information, what's happening with your bins. We've obviously got the Leeds bin app that I rely on even today when it was bin day, and I should know that. But having that one source of truth, that one source of information, be it Leeds housing options, be it the bins, be it accessing welfare benefits, accessing your councils even, like an email function, but really looking at how we can, if we are going to go about this work, let's try and maximise on what we're doing. The second question, perhaps in stark contrast to that, is data protection. There are a lot of concerns. Obviously, the government is currently digging up the corpse of of ID cards again, and that has raised a lot of eyebrows across wider society. Anything that we do going forwards needs to have that locked in reassurance that we're not going to be basically palming people's data off to some evil corporation in America. Will be in place for anything like this. Thank you.
Yeah, I can come back on that. Sorry, David Halligan, CTO for Leeds City Council. The biggest challenge we've got with having a single pane of glass across all services is the software we use, the business systems we use, very often doesn't allow us to integrate to get the data out and allow us to perform transactions within those applications. And I'll give you a good example is our housing application it has its own portal, it has its own logon, where users can log on and look at their housing options. It's really difficult to integrate with and develop all the functionality wrapped around it. But we are developing strategies for how we would do that, certainly from a providing visibility of all of your interactions with the council, so you know what the status of all your interactions are and all your cases that you've got open. And then we're looking at how you would progress those applications and progress those transactions to the next step. we in fact very interested in discussion this morning in Design Authority about how we would integrate with systems that are impenetrable and prevent us from gathering those insights and that information out of those systems to be able to present it in a single customer portal. So you talk about an application, I'm assuming you mean something that sits on a mobile phone. The technology's evolved towards web applications, so it'll sit broadly as a website that is mobile friendly. Our expectation is that we will have a customer portal, and you'll be able to log on and you'll see all things that are interactions between you and your local authority, including the bin day application embedded within it. Your council tax account should be within there. Any missed bins, any bulky waste collection transactions that you've asked for, housing applications, anything that you've got as an involvement with the council should be visible within that portal. That's the expectation, what we're shooting for. What will hold us back, like I said, is how well we can integrate with the systems that sit underneath that manage those kinds of transactions. And there's definitely complexity within that. That I wouldn't shy away from telling you that it does exist, and but we do absolutely see value in that single application that gives people access to all their information, all their transactions within Leeds City Council. And that is a stated goal of the programme. Yeah. Can't comment on the ID card bit for obvious reasons, but what we are looking to do is to streamline log on for customer account. There is something called Gov Log On, which we're intending on using, so we know who you are as an individual because you're authenticated UK citizen that has a Gov Log On, and you're able to log on and view your data within that customer portal, but all the data will reside within Leeds City Council's own systems and not shared with other parties. Is the expectation. So the concerns about ID card, the systems that we're implementing are ours within our tenancies, within our information governance controls, and the data will reside within our control.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I raised the point about ID cards just as an example of where concerns have been raised with regards to data protection. When you collect a lot of data in one place, there is a temptation for external actors to try and access that data illegally, and there's sometimes a temptation for organisations to identify parts of that data that can then be sold on. So it's just having those checks and balances and guarantees that people's data will be protected, and obviously you do your best trying to stop the nefarious actors. I suppose just coming back to my first question, the complexity of the system. I mean, I've been involved in trying to integrate systems, and quite often the biggest barrier is the cost of buying new stuff in that all works together. And if you want to get like Microsoft 365 that's working with kind of a CRM and an email system and everything else, it can be incredibly costly. I suppose if we had an infinite amount of money, what would the perfect system look like? Would it would we be able to sort of do all of this stuff bespoke if that was no object?
As Leeds City Council, I think that's really ambitious to build our own revs and bends system, to build our own children's case management and adults and health case management system. So we are, to an extent, at the mercy of the suppliers of those systems to provide access and be able to keep up with and modernise their architecture, their software to support integration. So, the thing that we could collective is to put pressure on those vendors to open up their APIs and give us access to things. That's really where we should be going with it, and I think DCIT have a responsibility to support us with that and help us with that interoperability. But we do have a strategy to integrate with all of the systems that we've got within our portfolio. So it's not a case of we won't be able to do it. It's how practical it is and how we approach it and what complexity there is within it.
Thank you. Councillor Renshaw.
Thank you, Chair. My first point is really repeating much of what Councillor Dowson mentioned about the access to hubs. And in ours in Robin Hood, we haven't got a hub and we haven't got the transport to get us to one either, because the hubs are in Morley, Middleton and Rothwell, and we haven't got transport down there. So I didn't know if you were going to provide a mobile hub that would come along and stay in a certain place for certain lengths of time. And then regarding the digital systems, I know many people who have worked in IT, moved along with digital progress as they've gone along. As soon as they've finished working, they don't want any more to do with it. The words they'll use to me is, I saw enough of that when I were at work. Don't ask me to go on there. A lot of residents only have the mobile phones, but they use it as a phone and nothing else. They won't go on any of the apps. So how are you going to encourage people to use apps or get access for the mobile hubs?
Yeah, it's probably my mistake on that because I talked about community hubs, but I mean libraries obviously as well when I talk about them. So they are a key. So you'll appreciate we have a 100% digital strategy in Leeds and a team who work very closely around digital inclusion with our voluntary sector. We are engaged with them on this programme. They already work with our hubs and library staff to make sure that they can do digital assisted. I think a big part of this programme, one side of the coin is what we do inside the organisation to make it easier for people to access services, but the other side of the coin is what we do to enable people to get and actually engage digitally with us, taking the very point that you raised, and the hubs and libraries are key to that. I would hope that our work that we do through 100% digital and the third sector would contribute to that, but it is a key part of this strategy in terms of how we work with communities to get them to work more digitally as well, because it's inevitable. It's not going to stop in terms of digital access, and other things like that. So I think we have to see that as important as almost the internal change as well. I mean, in terms of the point about some people not wanting to engage digitally at 100%, and some people can't either, and struggle in that way. So that's why we've said this isn't about digital by default. It isn't saying you're going to do it digitally and that's the only way you're going to do it. Our sort of mantra is sort of digital first. If we can do it digitally, we will, because we do know a lot of people would want to do that, but we're not going to stop sort of face-to-face and telephone. In fact, one of the digital things around telephone is voice. So you can, you can still ring up and get what you want. So that's reassurance. In terms of provision, in terms of mobiles and things like that, I mean, we're constantly looking at how we provide that provision, and it will be a consideration in terms of this work, in terms of how we get that message out, because it's key. And we know our mobile hubs have got Wi-Fi and things like that, so we can engage people digitally through those. But the libraries are central to it, as well as the hubs.
We do also have loan devices within libraries that people can take away and access digital services at home. So there was a digital inclusion grant a few years back that allowed us to furnish libraries with loan tablets that are quite frequently out on loan to people who don't have devices at home. and they are fitted with a 4G SIM card, much like a mobile phone, so they're not dependent on them having Wi-Fi access at home either. And obviously it gives them another option to be able to pick up a device and take it home and complete digital transactions at home if they wanted to do that.
Can I just say on that point though, they used to come to the Outer South Community Committee meetings for older people and tell them that there was access to iPad, whatever, a tablet. But that seems to have disappeared and faded out. Has it stopped, or is it still available for customers, and should they be made aware of that?
Man, I'll take that away and pick that up with them, because David's right, the iPad lending is a scheme that we still run. So I'll take that away and pick it up with the service.
Thank you. At this point, I think it's worth referring back to the questions that have been set to us as Scrutiny Board members in terms of offering suggestions as well as interrogation. So one of the areas that I think will be quite useful is we've pointed out today that when you're trying to tell people that you're doing something, oftentimes if you do it through the media that they're not involved in, you're not going to get any response off them, are you? So have we got a strategy that when we do actually have something to work with, because at the moment it feels like you've had 11 months of scrutinising the systems we've got already to understand and audit what the problems are before you actually curate a contract that you want somebody to deliver for us. But this interactivity that you're talking about, if we are going to trial it, and we are going to expect eventually people to buy into it, whether it's downloading apps or whatever, we do have very specific mailing responsibilities as council in terms of when we tell people what their council tax bill is. And I know that we try and be a paperless authority, but in some things we should really still be putting paper out there. I know that the electoral services people send me letter after letter around getting me on the electoral roll, and I assume that's funded by government to enable them to do that. I think when we have opportunities like that, we can include inserts in those communications to basically say to people, please try out our new version of customer services. So that would be my suggestion going forward in terms of getting more people involved, is making sure that they know it's there in the first instance. And then as local councillors, perhaps through community committees, as Councillor Renshaw was saying, we can then enable in situ community-based events for people to come out and try it. Because I think that gets rid of a lot of the fear, is if people actually have somebody there to enable them practically to go through a system. Sorry, so that's my suggestion. I'll go back to the questions now. And I had Councillor Hannon next on my list.
Thank you very much, Chair. My comments is the current platform that we have is very hard to navigate, especially somebody that is not digital savvy. So what we need to probably do is put somebody in that position where they are not digital savvy to see how they would navigate it. So at least then it's based on their needs and not on the council needs in terms of where things are. So I think there needs to be ideally visits to community committees and ways of engaging and getting that feedback back. Myself, trying to navigate the council website is sometimes daunting, and I'm probably 95% digital savvy, but I do find difficulties in finding things on there. So if I put myself in a position of somebody that's, sorry to use the term, elderly, that doesn't have the strength in terms of how to navigate a website, then we're putting them in a disadvantage straight away. And we know for a fact that there'll be a cohort of people out there that will not engage in the digital way, but we need to also look at how we can accommodate them through the digital process in one way or another. So I think we need to look at that. And the final point is, I know we are in the era of AI. I mean, is this something that could be incorporated into the platforms where it assists people in terms of getting the information and the services that they require? Is AI going to be something that you're going to look at? Thank you.
I'll ask Dave if you can come in on the AI point, just on the getting somebody who's not tech savvy or whatever to I mean, in a way, that's why. So we talk about user-centered design. So part of this design, when we get into the design before we've built anything, is actually talking to people. It's about how they want to navigate and things like that. And that's why I was saying it's a continuous process. I know we've done a lot of work on the website over many years of using user-centered design and getting customers in, even getting them to where we've tracked their eye movements on a screen and things like that to try and understand how they navigate. And navigation is always something that's going to be something that will evolve over time. But yeah, that's what we're talking about, trying to get to a position where we're designing it from a perspective of a customer or a resident in terms of how they access services and making it more straightforward for them. That's the sort of the end game really with this and the outcome that we're looking to achieve. So yeah, we can certainly in terms of engagement, there will be an ongoing engagement as part of the development around services, so we can talk to members and, you know, as well as residents, and we will do that and get them involved in designing it. But yeah, of course you can.
Thank you. Now, I'm being very indulgent because I'm allowing people back in who've been in already. But if we could be quick, we have got another item yet to discuss. And for those who are interested, there will be a comfort break as soon as Councillor Haig and Councillor Dowson have finished.
Thank you. And what has struck me in this debate is we are not the only council in the land that will be on this journey. There are definitely some who are ahead in terms of developing, especially front end. I mean, what's at the back end may vary from council to council, although a lot of those are common systems that are widely used. But in terms of developing that front end, having that experience, working with the companies who are likely to bid for this project, you know, what have we done to look at what's good and what's bad, and you know, is there and furthermore, is there a potential for working on front ends with other councils where we will get, you know, economies in terms of having something that is on a common platform?
Can I take questions as a whole and then you can respond? So sorry, I missed out Councillor McCluskey as well, so I'll bring him in next and then Councillor Dowson.
Thank you, Chair. I'm starting to get a complex here. I was going to obviously emphasise about the mobile hubs because that's the service we get in Farnley and Wortley, as do other wards, to emphasise that they're included in this. But with my disability champion hat on, are we looking at the needs of people who have sensory impairment, physical disability and learning disabilities? Are they being included in this and their ability to access these systems? Thank you.
Councillor Dowson.
Yeah. Award-winning digital team. I think we ought to remember they've done an awful lot. I think for a lot of us, it isn't, you know, life's a carousel, isn't it? It's just slowing it down so that people can get on board, which is where our library team come in. So I absolutely agree with Councillor Galton. If we can use some of the publications we send out already to put inserts in or whatever to say that these changes are coming. But if we're doing that, we also need to make sure that the front of house staff actually are aware that that's happening and have the training and the staffing levels at the time to cope with people who will come in following that request. The thing about feedback and AI is really important because on another scrutiny board I sit on, we're very taxed with AI. It's coming in, how is it working? Because it is the feedback people get when they make complaints that's important, and often they come to us. I emailed forestry and they haven't come back to me. AI will be great in that. And also there's the other thing about digital inclusion. We've had an ambition in the city over many years to fully include the city in digital inclusion. You only have to go into my ward and you'll see the kids hanging around community centres, the hubs and so on. And it's not because they're up to mischief, it's because they want to get a Wi-Fi signal, and that's the only place to do it. So I think if we are going to do this, we actually need to re-look at how we're going to make sure that Wi-Fi is accessible for all, not just in the city centre, but out in our communities as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Who's going for that? Lee?
Let me play back the topics. I think website navigation was one, disability and access to systems, standardized platform and AI, and I took a note also for digital end-to-end, because one of the things I think is important to tease out here is we're not just delivering a system that's accessible to end users, to citizens, we're delivering a system that improves access to systems for our own employees that will allow them to resolve inquiries at the first point of contact. That's one of the primary goals of this, is actually to make it easier for our own staff to get access to information and resolve inquiries at first point of contact. So where people have, working backwards, where people have difficulty accessing and navigating websites, I think maybe it's an unfair expectation that absolutely everybody should be able to access a website and that's the only channel that we make available for people to access services. Lee said at the top of this segment, our expectation is we're not closing any channel. Telephone is absolutely a channel, face-to-face is still a channel. We expect to support those ongoing, but help to make them more efficient and help that they're able to resolve inquiries and complete transactions at point of first contact. So improving our own employees' experience and their efficiency operationally. And I think that addresses website navigation. I think there's only so far you can go, and we have made huge investments in improving website navigation to allow people to access services and improve that customer experience. So hopefully that covers website navigation, disability access to systems, and what I call digital end-to-end, so improving our employees' ability to serve our customers better. Standardised platform, absolutely. There's a number of councils that have chosen a very similar tech stack, Liverpool being one of them, Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole BCP are another that have chosen this exact same stack. We did an evaluation of the state of customer experience platforms and who was ahead. Microsoft came out for us on top, mainly because we've got the skill set in-house to be able to develop and deliver this solution, and our skill set is predominantly based around a Microsoft platform, so we think we can go faster as an organisation using this technology. There are proven customer success stories out there. We did look at other technologies and felt that we didn't have the skill set and we'd be too reliant upon external suppliers to come and do it to us rather than us being able to do it for ourselves. We've already made an investment with Dynamics F&O, Financial and Operations, and the integration with Dynamics F&O helps us significantly. We've made other investments in the Microsoft suite, including Teams, Microsoft 365, SharePoint, and things like that mean that the ecosystem here is really strong, and how they all integrate and come together is really strong. It gives us a much better proposition to have a single digital workplace solution that allows us to be more efficient. AI Copilot absolutely is part of the strategy here, and we see that a lot of the automation benefits and the savings we'll make in operational efficiency by being able to both improve customer experience through AI, but improve internal communications and being able to get things done quicker internally come from use of AI. That's not making decisions on behalf of humans. That's just about being able to ease the transaction between one department and another, being able to signpost services and get access to services, being able potentially to partially complete forms with known information. So AI absolutely is a big part of this, and I think it will be both in back office systems and within our customer experience in the front end.
Excellent, thank you very much. That was a very absorbing discussion, ultimately. I hope you got some of your questions answered, but my one suggestion would be that next time you come and give us the next update, that we have a textually rich paper for us to pre-read beforehand, because it might help us, manage our focus a little bit better. So thank you very much. We are now going to go into a comfort break for 5 minutes, and we will be back at 12:53 to resume. Okay. Welcome back, everybody. We're starting the meeting again. Apologies for the extended time at today's Scrutiny Board. I have been a very ineffective chair in terms of managing people's input. But actually, when there's so much expertise in the room, I default to being permissive when it comes to inquiry and response. So, unfortunately, we're a little bit later and you have your lunch a little bit later. We're now on to household waste and recycling centres. We've been joined by rather a lot of people today, which is most gratifying. Now, we have a really good report, and first of all, as chair, I'd like to say thank you for the extra detail which was included in there, John Woolmer, in terms of demonstrating the wider waste economy in the city and how the council is supporting businesses and jobs in the wider recycling economy. I think the ask today is that you're looking for members' views on future provision and how greater recycling and reuse can be encouraged. And we will expect our questioning to take that format, if that's all right. So, we also have someone called Katie McHugh and Ted Brown. Yeah, you're very welcome to the board. We appreciate you haven't been to a board before, and we'll take that into consideration. Hopefully we will explain the process instead of just assuming that you know what's going on.
Could we do introductions just because I haven't got everybody?
Sorry. Other than those special introductions and welcomes, if we could have introductions from everybody else that's present as well, please, so that us on the board can make sure that we're referring to the right people at the right time. Right, so we'll start off with Councillor Rafiq.
Thank you, Chair. Mohammed Rafiq, the Exec Board Member for Climate, Energy, Environment and Green Spaces.
Down to you, John.
John Woolmer, Chief Officer for Environmental Services. Do you want to all to introduce ourselves, Chair? So, yeah.
Hurley Thackeray, Head of Service, Environmental Services.
Victoria Waller, I'm the Service Delivery Manager for the Household Waste Recycling Centres.
Philip Turpin, I work in managing the data for waste management and as part of the contract management team.
Katie McHugh, I'm a charge hand at Seacroft Household Waste Site.
Hello everybody, I'm Ted Brown and I'm the weighbridge operator at Kirkstall.
Sorry, I've not got a card. I'm Rosie Harvey, I'm a business officer in the contracts team.
So, John, do you want to briefly introduce the item?
Thanks, Chair. Before I do, Councillor Rafiq, do you want to say anything?
If I could start and John will come in, Chair. Okay. As you've said, Chair, it's a very detailed report with several appendixes and a range of analyses. There's a lot of information to take in there. I like to think, like I said, it's a very, very positive report. The report highlights the amount of waste taken to the facility has grown by 20% since 2019-20, with the particular increases in the amount of electrical items and cardboard brought to the site for recycling, as well as items for reuse together with DIY and general waste as well. And it's quite interesting that, you know, cardboard and electrical items, and I think things have changed since COVID. There's more obviously packaging and large packaging, and people are taking those, and it helps you know, they are doing that. I think, you know, the partnership with Revive Reuse has been a particular success. We've got 3 shops now at Seacroft, Kirkstall, and one at Hunslet Shopping Centre. And the reusable items have actually been over 1,250 tonnes going back into the communities as of 2024-25. We have got one of the highest recycling rates compared to core cities, and I believe one of the highest number of HWRCs in the country. Just to put you in comparison, Birmingham, which is the highest local authority in the country, has got 6 HWRCs. So I'm not going to go on for too long. I'll bring in John to add a bit more, bit more detail, and then I think, given the time, we'll probably want to go straight to questions, Chair. Okay.
Thanks, Councillor Feeks. Thanks, Chair. So yeah, I'll try and be brief as I can be, but obviously it's quite an extensive report, and I'll just try and highlight 2 or 3 of the things that I would particularly draw the board's attention to. I'd just like to thank the colleagues that are attending today with me, and I thought it was really important to bring members across the team, including 2 operational staff, to the meeting, and I hope that's well received, and it helped their development as well and understanding of your roles for future, and hopefully it will help us in answering some of the questions today as well. So the report, as I say, is pretty comprehensive. It starts about setting the context around the reasons we have house away sites and our legal obligations. I think that's important in terms of some of the questions we have around the number of house away sites we should have, etc., and the reach of those house away sites. So it gives some context around that. And then it moves on to providing details of how we run the sites currently in Leeds in terms of the amount of staffing we have and how they're allocated across the sites. So it gives the idea of scale. There's lots of information provided in the appendices around outputs and outcomes, particularly outputs of other sites. Is this mic working well? Is it okay? Yep. So you'll see information around the tonnages of different wastes that we collect at the household waste sites and what happens to those tonnages of waste, both in terms of where it ends up, but also the contractors that manage those particular waste streams. The report also talks about the fact that we also manage commercial and trade waste at 2 of our 8 waste sites across the city, Seacroft and Kirkstall, and explains why that is and what happens with that. Then we get into more detail within the report around recycling rates, what happens in terms of reuse, how we promote reuse through the waste sites, and try and divert as much of the waste that comes to the sites as possible into reuse and then to recycling as a second measure. So there's examples given in the report around our main reuse partners that we contract with and also have agreements with. So Revive being one of the biggest ones, and I'm sure you'll be aware of the Revive shops at Kirkstall and Seacroft sites. And we also have a key relationship with Seacroft with Seagulls paint for the recycling of paint, obviously, and that's quite an innovative approach nationally, for which Seagulls have got a number of awards around. But also we have relationships with contractors and make sure through the contracts team that those contracts have as much value as possible, including social value, to make sure that we're, if possible, contracting with contractors that they'll add to the local economy, as the Chair's highlighted, but also have relationships themselves with potentially other reuse partners and make sure the recycling is going to the best use possible. I then talk, and Councillor Feeks referred to it in the report, around some of the comparisons in terms of benchmarkings with other authorities across the country and core cities. There is a limitation to what we can benchmark, and I've made sure that's highlighted where that's the case. We want to make sure wherever we are, we're comparing apples with apples, and sometimes that's really difficult because of the way the data is collected, and sometimes there's a discrepancy between how councils submit that data. I think it's right to say, Phil, isn't it? Some bits are missing from some councils. Leeds isn't, I hasten to add. So sometimes we have to sort of sieve through the data to make sure we are providing you with a fair benchmarking analysis. I think I'll leave it there, Chair. As you said, Chair, at the beginning, I think one of the reasons to come to yourselves is to provide you with this the report and all the data, and for you to pick the bits that you're most interested in, and either obviously to ask questions now of us, raise ideas you might have yourselves. But we wouldn't want the conversation to stop there. You know, if members do want to come to us and ask questions outside of the meeting or arrange a meeting, we're very happy to do that. Victoria is very happy to host any of you that want to come to any of their waste sites, albeit even if it's not in your ward, it doesn't matter. We're serving all the residents of the city, so please do take her up on that offer. And she's very pleased, I'm sure. And she makes a good cup of coffee, don't you? There, yeah. Just told me to say that. So I'll leave it there, Chair, if that's okay, and open it up to discussion and questions.
Great, thanks, John. I think it's one of those places that actually we've usually got experience of as customers. So first-hand experience, I think. I'm going to call in Councillor McCluskey first, as he has been overlooked in previous discussions today.
It's my comeback. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, well, first of all, I just want to say it's an excellent service. As a user of the service, really appreciate the staff. I use the Kirkstall site quite a lot, and the staff are amazingly helpful, always pointing you in the right direction. So I just think that needs noted that you've got really good staff at these sites. The one thing that I find, and I also love the way the paper does refer to it as the tip, because that's what most of us call it. Two manners. I didn't know that we'd stopped the pass, that you used to have to carry an ID pass. I didn't know that it stopped, and our residents being put off because they don't know they've lost their pass, and think, oh, I can't go because you need to show ID. And the other one was, it's outside residents who don't have transport, and the amount of then, well, I'll just leave it out in the on the street or on the grass verge, and then that causes hassles. It's how we get the bulky waste to the site is still an issue for many residents. But thank you, Chair.
Would you like a few and then take them all at once? Okay, so we have Councillor Harrington.
Right, well, thank you. I just want to say, John, that I think the report is really, really good. There's just a couple of points. Really pleased to see that we've got the coffee pod recycling project going on, the pilot, which is fabulous, and that's in 3 areas around the city, not just in Wetherby, but in some of the other areas as well. But apparently there's millions of people that drink coffee with the coffee pod machines, and we really do need to recycle it. So that's really, really good. There's just one issue on page 85 of the report, number 68, investment in sites for the future. I know we've had the discussion previously in briefings that when we're trying to plan the usage or the service that we're trying to deliver as a council, can we get a better linkage between planning decisions that have been taken where we know that there are going to be planning developments in that area, so that you could say Wetherby, for instance, we know there's 1,200 houses are going to be built in the next 5 years. So that would suggest that at least 2/3 of those will probably use the waste recycling centre at Thorpe Arch. So if there was a better joined up working between planning applications that have actually been approved, that you know are going to be built out in the next 5 years, 5 to 10 years, then that would actually help with that planning. But that's just a comment, but thank you very much.
Councillor Dowson.
Well, I think firstly I'd like to echo my colleague over here in saying how fantastic I find our sites. I use 3 really regularly, Ellegill, Meanwood and Kirkstall, and the staff there are absolutely fantastic. So, you know, thank you. You're among friends, because we do think you do a fantastic job. But I've got a few questions, not for you, but one is around residential customers building waste, because apparently you're allowed 1 free bag, and then you have to start paying for it. And I'm just wondering how you're planning to do that going forward. Is that something you're going to retain, or because I know a lot of people who are having a kitchen redone, or they're doing some DIY, find it quite restrictive only being able to take 1 bag at every visit. The second thing is around glass. Now you can put glass in the bins What are we doing around glass recycling at the sites? I know there's a question, and we've asked it already, around the glass recycling on the street. Do we need that many bins and so on? Anyway, and the third thing is around the site, the skips. I'm only 4'10". I absolutely appreciate you can't cater for everybody, but and you do it with the green waste. You have slides so that I don't have to lift it up. And there's a lot of people in my situation where it's very hard. They're elderly or so on. They can't get it up. Now you're employing the bigger skips at recycling, because we all love recycling. It's getting very hard to actually get the rubbish in, and I'm just wondering whether there's anything that could be done, you know, even if it's just a little step or something to help people who are struggling, or because we obviously have an issue with staff. We don't want staff to injure themselves in handling other people's waste. So I'm just wondering how you might be able to square that circle for people who struggle to get the waste into the skips when they get there.
Great, that's 3 sets of questions. Who would like to start?
I shall start, Chair, and then I might seek some help from colleagues around the table at certain points. So the first question around residents requiring a permit, or not requiring a permit as the case is known, as the report sets out. Yeah, you're quite right, Councillor, that the requirement was removed just prior to COVID, actually. I think once we removed that requirement, and obviously through COVID, if you remember, we introduced a booking system anyway. So we've not reintroduced that permit system, as you rightly say, and the report explains the rationale why. And I think that's a really good point that's raised, that there will be some residents that probably don't realise that, and therefore are they being put off coming to the tip because they haven't got the permits. So I think it's a good point to raise. We can always do more, but we do. It's on the website. We have done comments before around it, but I think that's something we'll take on board and perhaps do something around in the future. Maybe do some comments on that to share on social media. Sorry.
Yeah, just we don't get many, in fact I'm not aware of any customers coming in sort of wanting to provide any identification, and it's something that we don't ask, so it's not a problem at the moment in time. I don't know whether Katie and Ted want to come in on that with permits.
It is far and few between that. It's usually older people that ask if they need one, but we just obviously educate them as we go and let people know that it's no longer a thing.
So just to finish on that question, so that provides some evidence that the people that are going know that they don't have to use a permit. So you can make it an assumption of that then, that most people must know. Otherwise, the ones that are coming will be saying, "Where's my permit?" So, but I take the point that your point is more about the people that aren't coming to the site because they think they have to bring a permit. So yeah, we'll look at that in terms of some comments around that. Thanks for that suggestion. The issue of bulky waste of those that can't take items in their car to the sites, either it's too big or they haven't got the transport. Yeah, it's always going to be an issue. And one of the things the report doesn't do, and we did have a chat about this, was in hindsight we probably should have referenced within the report how that links to the wider strategy of how we manage waste. So, for example, the Leeds Accredited Waste Carriers Scheme, in terms of people being able to access that to find somebody to legally take their waste away from them. So there's a little bit of joined upness there that we haven't done ourselves service with in terms of explaining that. So that's always going to be the issue, isn't it? So we provide that free bulky waste collection once a year for all households, and any households in receipt of housing income support get up to 4 or 5 collections, I think, bulky collections a year. So there is that facility there. There is always, there's often comments around the accessibility of that because it gets booked up really quickly. We did increase a few years ago the amount of slots available, but they all do get taken up. So that is an issue. But yes, I'll take that on board. But there's very little otherwise we can do at the sites themselves. We've tried to make them as accessible as possible for people. And one of the ways that we do that, obviously, is to make them open 7 days a week, all year round. Only closed Christmas Day, Boxing Day, New Year's Day. and we're open pretty much all day, every day. But I take that point. I just need to put my pin in.
Oh, Councillor Kluski?
I just come back. I am nitpicking.
Yeah.
Those points I'm making, the service is really top notch.
No, thank you. And I said that, but yeah, the point is to raise those nitpicky questions, isn't it, and for us to respond to those. So that's fine. The question around the better linkage to sort of planning decisions on housing growth, Councillor Normanton, I think you said, didn't you? I think, yeah, obviously that's a good point. We're looking at, and we do work closely with planning colleagues, and I think that's one of the things that will come out of this report. That's one of the things we're looking forward with, is we've got this report now. It's been a really, really good exercise for us to do as a team and to work together on it, and that reveals really that issue of, right, here we are, this is what we've got. Well, what about the future? You know, I think we've argued well enough and provided the evidence that shows that we have a good provision across Leeds, arguably better than most cities or equivalent places. It's all different, because if you live in a county or a country place, you're going to have different travel needs, etc. So I think we've got a good provision, but you're absolutely right. Planning for the future, is that provision going to be adequate? So one of the things that we wanted to do for this report, but we didn't have the ability to do it yet, was trying to remap the distance that people have to travel to each site and do like a spatial exercise around that. And that is something we want to try and work with colleagues, potentially in planning around, to re-look at the 8 now, what's the reach of those sites, and that'll identify the gaps. And if we do overlay that with the next 5 or 10 years housing growth on top of that, that will be a really useful exercise to do, and then we can work on that. So thanks for that. Yeah, the DIY waste, I might defer to an expert here on the table around the actual quantities, but I think I'm struggling to find it, but it's definitely in the report. We mentioned in the report about the change in legislation around that. So a couple of years ago now, the government changed the DIY waste regulations so that councils couldn't charge for that waste, and there was a prescribed amount, and that's what I'm struggling to find around that. It was like a boot full of, it was defined as, wasn't it? And we've defined it as 1 or 2 big bags. It's basically a boot full of waste that can be taken every month, is it? Up to, is it every 4-week period, yeah? But then other than that, it's really a kind of a fair use policy, isn't it? We don't overly police that, as far as I'm aware, at the sites. We tend to be generous in allowing people. So we're not literally looking to say, well, that's a little bit more than a boot, you're going to have to pay for that. So we do apply that policy in a very pragmatic way. And I think I'd say as members, if you do get any cases where you think you're hearing that that's not how it's working, then do let us know, and we'll look at that. So we try to be, like I say, very generous around that sort of definition. Then the other 2 items.
On that issue, John, while you're looking at the rest, I'm assuming that you don't photograph people as they come in to understand what their registration number is or whatever, to go, oh, they were here 4 weeks ago. So it's just basically if you had very, very regular customers that you might have an issue.
Absolutely, Chair. And other councils do have ANPR sort of technology, and they do use that. We've shied away from that. It's possibly something we could do in the future if we felt necessary, but obviously there's a cost and investment to that. And at the moment, what we're trying to do is, like I say, run a very customer-friendly, pragmatic service and not trying to get into that kind of enforcement. What I'd say is, and the way you've described it there, Chair, is absolutely right. And I think that's because we trust the staff to make those judgments and to build those relationships and understand they are the ANPRs in effect of the sites. And we think that works very well.
Are we ready for our next round of questions?
2 more questions, I think. Lewis picked up, and one's around glass recycling. Do we need as many as we have now, given the fact of the success of the green bin? That is something we're working on at the moment, and Ed's doing some work around that to look at the capacity, because that contract is actually up next year. So we're working on that at the moment, getting all the data together. Now we're a year into the green bin and know it's established and it's worked. We can look, we've got the contract coming up, so we're getting all the data around what currently the glass banks are collecting outside the sites and inside the sites. They still are collecting a significant amount of tonnes. Top of my head, something like 300 or 400 tonnes a month still, something like that.
Yeah, you're getting about 200 on the banks and about 50 or 60 on the household side.
So that's about 250 tonnes a month from the banks outside of the waste sites and about 50 tonnes a month still from the banks in the waste sites. So they still are getting, and that's a lot if you multiply it up by times 12 a year. So it's still a significant amount. So I think there's still a journey to take, and I suspect we will still make that provision. I think the outcome of the review, we will still want to make the provision. But when we've got the result of that review, we will work really closely with ward members, and we won't remove bottle banks without having those conversations at a ward level. We're probably in a position now where it's flipped the other way now, the way more members previously were saying we want more bottle banks, but actually now, okay, we're okay now if you move them. So but again, we'll make sure we have those local conversations and make sure it fits what the local circumstances. Finally, the skips for accessing for people who are not so tall. Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I know we do that, like as you described, Councillor Dowson, for the garden waste, and I don't know if there's anything you can add to that in terms of the practicalities on site with that, or is that...
Hi. No, it's not something we've had any complaints about, but it's definitely something we could look into. I know we've increased those chutes in a few of the sites this year, and it's always something we can look into and provide further details if you need it.
Councillor Darcy, did you want to come back quickly?
Just quickly on the bottle bank issue, because John and I have been discussing it. It picked up. It's not a matter of more bottle banks. It's now an issue of do we need them where they are, because they often cause problems of littering around them, people throwing boxes and plastic bags, noise of potentially people on businesses putting bottles in late at night and so on. So I would be really interested, as local ward members, we probably all would be interested in seeing the statistics about what's working where and how we can actually maximise the tonnage, because obviously that's the important thing, and how we manage any that's remaining. But I'm with you. I think we've now got to the point, because of the excellent service you provide around glass recycling now, that we can actually start doing away and removing them.
Thank you very much. Councillor Farley.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I'll preface this, as everybody else has done, by acknowledging the excellent experience I've had previously when I've been to the tip. Meanwood in particular. I suppose my comment or question is slightly more negative, and it's not necessarily relating to the service provided by the tips themselves, but rather what has happened in the absence of a tip. So as an elected representative for Bermondsey and Richmond Hill, part of my ward covers the Hare Hills area. As we're all very well aware, Hare Hills suffers from endemic fly tipping, people dumping stuff at the end of streets, consistent CNT teams going out and just moving stuff day in, day out. In a 24-hour period, something might get removed, and when you come back there, it's doubled. There used to be a tip in Hare Hills. That has now gone. It has been replaced by a school, so I'm not going to bemoan the construction of a new school. But do we have any data to assess what has happened in the absence of the Hare Hills recycling sites and the impact that that's had in terms of an increase or a decrease on fly tipping in the area? And looking to the future, is there any way in which, if not a full recycling site, a full tip, is it possible to potentially explore looking at like a satellite site by which we can sort of encourage people to sort of leave all of their stuff in one location rather than it being scattered across LS9? Because it feels like that would be a better solution for residents, and it would mean that myself and my colleagues aren't having to spend £2,000 buying a camera to watch specific areas where we know there are issues.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor. Yeah, there's obviously a lot in that question. I think that I can't remember when the site in Hales was shut. It was before my time. I think it was 10 years, 15 years ago. So it's been a considerable amount of time ago. So I'm not sure about what we could do in terms of comparing data now to then and the effects of that closure directly on any increases in fly tipping, etc. It'd be a very difficult exercise to do. I think it's an anecdotal real life thing to explain rather than actually data we could provide. I think I would respond to that is that is to completely recognise what you're saying in terms of the problems there that we have in Hales around more fly tipping and more or putting out waste into the streets than perhaps other parts of the city. Recognise that as a problem. It's no denial around that. And as you say, it does therefore cause extra resources from the other parts of my service, Clean Neighbourhoods team, and also attention from people like the Serious Environmental Crime team and enforcement officers. We try our best to work with yourselves and the community around that and around trying to educate and explain what facilities and are available to people, whether that be LORCS, the Leeds Scrutiny Carrier Scheme, whether it be the bulky collection service. And in terms of the nearest waste site is probably Seacroft, I suspect, into East Leeds. I've just quickly Googled it. It's 9 minutes drive away. So it's not that far away, but obviously that's the issue in Hales, I suspect, is more that people probably wouldn't get in the cars to drive 9 miles. But again, there's perhaps an issue there around trying to educate people around that. The idea of having some kind of different way of doing things in a place like Hales that bridges that gap is certainly something I'm interested in looking at. Clearly, that comes with, well, what's the cost of that and how we can resource that, and in practicalities, how we could do that. I know that in other councils, they've done kind of versions of almost mobile household waste sites where a refuse lorry or two comes round and you can have like a bit of a, not an amnesty, but a way that you can have that mobile facility. That's something certainly we'll look at. I know we've discussed it, not in a lot of detail before, but again, obviously with a huge caveat of the resource. And I can imagine the response to that will be, yeah, but you'll save the money in other costs, and I appreciate that, but ultimately we need to work that out. So that's certainly something we could look at. And by the way, it's not just an issue of Hales. There are 2 or 3 other places in the city where that also is a concern. So that is something I think we should look at again. Yeah.
So just come back quickly on that. I mean, it impacts on, I live in East End Park and there's a load of fly tipping that occurs around me. And I suppose it's more of a quality of life issue. The fact is, like, if you live on an end terrace and people are consistently dumping stuff there, that lessens your quality of life, being exposed to that. There's also obviously another issue that's separate around people literally driving into LS9 and then just dumping stuff from other areas. But I appreciate that's not an issue for this discussion. But yeah, it's really about how can we improve the environment in which people are living. And I think just by having like one or 2 locations where people can dump stuff for teams then to collect in a way that's not, on their doorstep would be a quality of life improvement. That's a comment rather than a question.
Thank you very much. Councillor Cunningham.
Thanks, Chair, and thank you, team. And it's really nice to put a face to some of the names who've helped me over the years, so thank you all very much. So I'm interested in, I'm always really impressed with all of the other organisations that Leeds work with, like Seagulls, Revive, Leeds Wood Recycling, Bikes College, all of which I've used over the years myself. So relating partly to our last paper about digital inclusion, are we working with any partners looking at kind of the recycling of mobile devices and old laptops and other kind of electrical devices that also get brought to the tip and linked? And a separate question, I'm also really interested in the development of more kind of pedestrian and maybe cycle access to the tips as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cunningham. Through the chair, I'll hand over to Rosie. Would you be able to talk about the offer and the contracts and how that works relating to the computers and phones, and then perhaps between me and you, Victoria, can we pick up the pedestrian access thing? Yeah.
So all the waste electrical and electronic equipment goes through our WE contract. So there's banks at the household waste sites, there's also banks out in the district. That's everything that comes through there is recycled as in broken up into component parts. But we also have a high value WE scheme where an operative segregates things like laptops, mobile phones that can be reused or have kind of a higher return. So they've got, you know, more high quality items in there that they can recycle. We also work with the contractor to do one-off schemes. So for example, in COVID, we did a laptop reuse scheme where we encouraged people to bring their laptops to the household waste sites, and then they were wiped, and then a more agile operating system was put on there by other partners, and they went back into schools, you know, to help children that didn't have access to these things at home. So it's quite, we've got kind of a core service which will recycle the high value stuff, but we've also got standalone projects that we do from time to time. So it's quite a good offering from the WE contractor. They're very flexible, and any ideas that we've got, they're happy to discuss, so we're quite fortunate.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Rosie. In terms of the pedestrian access, yeah.
Hi, in terms of pedestrian access, we do have a pedestrian access down at Kirkstall, and we know that we don't have that facility at other sites. It would take significant sort of investment to change those sites, and we appreciate that. Our paramount sort of interest is the safety of the public when they come onto site. We just can't mix the amount of traffic and people on foot or bicycles. So we know we've got a bit of a gap there, and that we need to address that. What I would say is that when we get any queries regarding that and people want to come onto site on foot, we sort of make arrangements with them if we can reach them. So we might say to a resident at Meanwood, well, if you come in a different way off, we meet you, you know, we can come and take it off you and sort of make those decisions as we're going along. But we have to know who they are, and they have to reach out to us. And it'd be great to have pedestrian access and bicycle access on all of our sites, but unfortunately that would take significant change to site and of course costs associated with that.
Thank you very much. Councillor Renshaw.
Thank you, Chair. I don't think there'd be as much rubbish on the streets if our bins were collected, and I think we've had numerous meetings with refuse service over the collection of bins in Ardsley and Robin Hood, and I'm not sure if we've got another meeting lined up. But one of the issues that was raised was when we get our daily report over streets that are missed, they're in different orders depending who's done the report, and if it was more consistent it would be easier for members to read through it. But there's always at least 2 streets on there from Ardsley and Robin Hood. And then a previous comment that was raised by Councillor Harrington before she left was about the new developments, and you'll be aware of a number of new developments, and week after week we have to ring up or email on behalf of at least one resident who just happens to live in the new development, and she's the only resident I think at the moment, but her bin, because it's not down on the list, isn't collected with the rest of the street. A different team come out to take her collection. Why? I don't know. Why it can't be just added on?
Councillor Renshaw, if you don't mind, that's not to do with the household waste resorting sites. I appreciate that sometimes people are advised to take uncollected waste to a household resorting site because it hasn't been collected. But the performance that you're talking about will be discussed in January, so you'll have a
Thank
little
you.
wait in terms of how
I
we can have
save
a...
all those items for January.
We'll have a consolidated response then for that, if that's all right. Councillor Hannon.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I'm just going to sort of talk about how well the student changeover has been this year. I want to say a big thank you to the team. However, there is some work that can be done in terms of how can we intercept some of the student donations and promote more of the tips that students can access. I think that needs to be something that we need to look at next year. And the other thing is, are we talking about bins today, or is it? No. Okay. So definitely, how can we get students? Because normally parents come up with the cars to take some of the stuff away, but while they're taking some of the stuff away, can we probably look at encouraging parents to go to the tips and take some of the rubbish and dump it there, rather than getting the refuse teams to come and look at collecting it?
Yeah, very quick on that. Absolutely. We have, as you recognise, quite a well-developed approach now between us all. It's very joined up with the universities, members' involvement, council waste sites, Clean Neighbourhoods team, and even landlords also involved in that process and helping out. So it has become a very well-oiled machine and was worked, I think, best the last 2 or 3 years than ever. But I agree, there's still room for improvement in terms of what we do, making sure that people are aware that they can come and use council waste sites. I kind of prefer that they took them back to their own council area and deposited it there, but yeah, the reality is, of course, that's not going to happen, and we just need to make sure we do open up Kirkstall, don't we, to extra hour or so, but also we allow access for landlords for free, don't we, if they're part of the Leeds landlord scheme, to tip for free during that. Well, always, but particularly encouraged during that period. And we want to try and put as much onus on the landlords as possible in this process, because it's their waste as well, really. It's their business waste as well. But yeah, I take the point, and that's something we'll redouble our efforts on for next year, how we get those comms across to students in advance so they plan for it, and maybe they can have those discussions with their parents before they come. Right, we can go to the tip, and but yeah, absolutely.
It was mainly about the comms, really, how can we, and probably the universities. I know there's a good relationship with the universities, and let's just get them comms out that there is another facility there, rather than leaving it next to the black bin. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Any further questions? Councillor McCluskey.
I just think the point with students as well, do we encourage the students at the start of the year to actually get their stuff from the recycle shops? It'd save them a bit of money. Say in Freshers Week, have a stall to say, we've got the shop down in Kirkstall, you needed a vacuum cleaner, you need blah blah blah, bat second hand at a much less price.
Well, thank you, Councillor. We'll find out for certain and drop you an email just so you know, but I'm quite sure that's Revive do that. So it's Revive is the business, if you like, albeit a third sector business, community interest company that deal with that, and it's for them to sort of promote their activities. But I'm quite sure they do something like that at stalls, exactly what you described. But we'll double check that, yeah. And if not, that's something we'll raise, yeah.
Great, thanks very much. I won't ask my question because it's late enough. But I thank you very much for your attendance. I note that your the amount of stuff that we recycle goes down during the winter. I'm assuming that's because there's less people turning up with stuff to your sorting sites, because a lot less DIY takes place. No, you're shaking your head now. Is there any particular message you'd like to get out, which is seasonal, not just about people bringing you mince pies or anything when they drop their rubbish off?
The seasonal variation is almost entirely, I'm not looking at Phil to nod, is entirely due to the fact that there's less garden waste brought in those periods, so the proportion of that adds to recycling moves down. So that's mainly what it's about, yeah. It's like a statistical anomaly as such, but yeah, that's the main reason.
Very good, thanks very much for your attendance and best of luck for the next year. Now then, how many other items have we got left? That's it. We don't even have date and time of next meeting.
I've lost it now. 8.
It's the 8th of December. where we will have mince pies. Abigail Marshall Katung style. 8th of December.
It's a Monday, Councillor Renshaw.